Hello, everybody. Welcome back on Frontiers in Artificial Intelligence. This is Paolo, your host. And today with us, we have Emrah Gultekin, who is actually the CEO of Chooch. We already interviewed the CTO of this very interesting company, and it is a very forward-looking computer vision company here out of Silicon Valley, California. And today we have the CEO. So, Emrah, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. It's wonderful to be with you, and I look forward to talking a bit about our company and about the future of AI. Yeah, so
Okay.
great. Yeah.
That's good. So, Emrah, you were telling me that you were coming in and out of the United States, a typical immigrant kind of life. Can you tell us a couple minutes? What was your childhood like? What did you do? What did you study? Like, tell us a little bit about your story before you started any company.
Yeah, so it's I think we're one of the first generations that grew up kind of like multicultural. Starting from the 70s, my father was a student at MIT, so we grew up partially in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we've been around science and technology all our lives, and the entire family, they're scientists and engineers, except for myself. I kind of became the black sheep of the family, just trying to earn a living, actually, initially. So I went to boarding school in Virginia, went to college at Brown University, and after that, I moved back to Turkey because I had fallen in love with my country. It's a magical place, as the Mediterranean, and good communication, good food, and all that. Of course, that's not the case all the time. But we spent a lot of time there building companies, also in Turkey, in Eastern Europe, Russia. Did a lot of work in Central Asia and the Middle East. So spent a good decade there doing that, developing those things, mainly in non-technical, let's say, services, mainly real estate, some social investments, built 2 schools, and so forth. So just a varied background. You always need tech and science in anything you're doing today. So even if you're doing a services company, or even if you're developing real estate, you also need those. So, mixed immigrant background. We moved back to the States in 2014, and then started this company in Silicon Valley. So it's been quite a ride. We're not the young startup generation, but we have some gray hairs and some experience that comes with that, which we think is valuable. But it's always a challenge to have a startup, even if it doesn't matter how old you are.
Yeah, we'll touch on that in a minute. But before we go on that, let me ask you this. If you were back to when you were 18 years old and you would have to reintroduce yourself to, your sweetheart in high school, to your girlfriend, how would you reintroduce yourself today? Like who you are, what are your interests, how would you catch the attention today?
Well, that's a great question. I think we all change in time, and sometimes for the better, and sometimes for the worse, depending on what you choose to do in life. I think your choices when you're very young is quite important, and a lot of my decisions and also interests haven't really changed over time. I mean, I've always been someone who's interested in social movements, in science, in equating science, technology, and people, humans as well. So those things haven't changed. But of course, you make mistakes in life, and sometimes you learn from those mistakes. And I think that's a general rule that we can have. And if I were to introduce myself to my sweetheart, I'd probably say, I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. If you stick with me, we'll ride this out, and we'll be successful all together. So that's really what I'd say. I mean, you learn from your mistakes and your failures, and I think at a young age you don't realize that. You think you know more, but as you gain more experience, you realize how less you know, and you become more humble and modest about your beliefs, I guess.
Yeah, so you always don't know what you don't know. Let's take a look now to your baby. Before doing that, let me say that we already interviewed the CTO of the company, and so Chooch is primarily a computer vision company that is developed has developed a highly integrated API service that gives a very deep and rich set of information about pictures, which in the depth of this information goes beyond what other competitors are out there. So we kind of have an understanding, but what would be interesting to know is how did the IdealChurch come about? Was it because, like somebody was working to a crazy technology, or was there a market study? So how did it develop actually?
Yeah, that's a really good question because, there's no good answer to this because I think we all watch too many sci-fi movies when we're young and it kind of gets embedded in our head. But the CTO, as you've already interviewed him, he was working on image recognition many, many years ago. So he developed a healthcare image recognition system before we started Chooch. So it came about partly because of that, partly because of one of our initial clients who wanted to build interactive TV and interactive images. So that was also one of the instigators of building a more computer vision AI company rather than a generalistic AI company.
How was the interactive TV involved in, trying to build a company that does a very high level of quality recognition?
Well, imagine this. So in the future, a lot of people have this vision, but it's hard to implement automatically. There's going to be a different way that we all interact with images and with videos. And that different interaction is based on touching things and touching people inside the videos and the images. But when you touch them, when you touch the objects, it has to either give you information or it has to do something. So how do you create actionable metadata automatically in videos and images this way? And one way to do it is through automated meta tagging, which is what we're doing for interactive TV. So imagine you're watching a show and suddenly you see somebody and you're like, oh, who's this? You can touch that person. It'll give you information about that person and also give you information about what they're wearing and, perhaps what they're talking about, a summary and so forth. So these are the things that interactive TV is using our technology for. And it's a challenge because, you can do this manually because, you have people to embed these types of this information manually, but it's not scalable if you do it manually. So you need an AI to be able to look at these and do it real time. So that's really the vision of this TV bit. And also on your glasses, like you're wearing glasses today. In the future, you're going to be wearing more interactive glasses, and those interactive glasses need to make you smarter about your environment. So whether you're looking at something or looking at some person, it should give you some feedback about what you're looking at. So that was the initial vision of Chooch, and then
we are looking at advanced media applications, so media and social applications like interactive social. By the way, I started the company in interactive TV a long time ago. I was obsessed by that back in the past. And then the second area, the vision was around augmented reality, basically.
Yeah.
This would be the engine to recognize information about the environment where the person is moving. So how much of that vision you're actually pursuing today? Like how much the things you're doing align with that vision right now?
It's 100% aligned. So everything that we're doing. So the first order in developing that type of interactive TV, we're not the ones who are going to develop interactive TV. We're not media people. But what we do is we're the enabler and the technology, which means the first order of that is to generate the metadata, is to generate very highly detailed metadata. So everything that we're doing today is centered around that. And it's, there's this generalistic thing where, you can generate, these metadatas very generalistically and also in high detail. But the more detail you get into, of course, you have the more specialization you need, the eyes. So what you're looking at. So, that's the thing that we're doing today is training very intelligent eyes for specific use cases and for specific tasks. And that becomes part of that company's API. So it's all centered around that. We can talk about the business model and so forth, but the first order of this is to generate the metadata and to generate it automatically. So yeah.
Is there any current customer who is in the interacting TV area, if you can disclose it?
We do have one. We do have one. We can't disclose, but yeah, we have one. Well, the application is this. It's so you're basically watching a TV show, and if you're watching it on your iPad or iPhone, you're able to interact with the video real time. So touching things on the video, touching objects or people and so forth. And there's an ad element to it, of course, advertising element to it, but it's more our focus is on user satisfaction. So to give user more information about what they're watching and what they're looking at in real time. So that's one of them. And then we're talking to one of the major cell phone providers, carriers in the U.S. right now as they roll out 5G, because this is also part of the 5G thing is very important for this type of technology.
In what sense, if you can say, in what sense, how is this connected with the 5G?
So the faster speed means you can actually deploy these on phones. And if you could download like Chooch IC2 right now, which is on the App Store, it'll give you real-time information about what you're looking at in your surroundings. So, and if whoever has access to that type of technology will be able to better capitalize on 5G as well, because 5G just makes it easier for these types of apps to roll out.
So elicit an immediate question. Do you have, in addition to an API strategy, do you have an SDK strategy in the make? Or do you think it would make sense? Do you have a mobile SDK strategy in the make?
Yeah, so we try and make things simple, right? The API and SDK are combined today, but we do the implementation of everything is on the cloud. To take this type of visual recognition and put it on the phone, which a lot of competitors are looking at, is basically impossible, because it's like trying to put Google on your phone. If it's offline, it doesn't work. You can't have the information of the world in your fingertips being offline. So I think there's a fallacy there. So we combine the API with the SDK, but we're also now rolling out the dashboard for our enterprise clients who don't use APIs, who just want basic storage unit and AI as well.
So let's take a step back, because this is for our audience. We're going into kind of discussing a little bit the business model of serving such a complex technology that analyzes environments and images in a very deep way. So the business model today that is emerging with these large companies like the Google of the world, the Microsoft, the IBM, the SAP, and so forth, is there is an API basically that they provide. They also provide a service on top of that. However, for mobile-first application or mobile application in general, there might be a possibility to go through SDK. That means basically having software installed directly onto the mobile phone. You're saying in this area it might not work. So in terms of business model, when we look at the API, the SDK, and the service, can you maybe comment on where you see the sweet spot for a startup, and also how you see that the startup can compete with the large platforms that already existed? Take it starting from your case, and then maybe you expand the general case.
I think one of the major obstacles startups have is getting products stabilized and scalable. Whether it's API or SDK or dashboard, it doesn't really matter. Services as well. Services is a bit different. A startup needs to build a product which is scalable. And I think that's the initial thing. And you build services on top of that product. So that's what we're seeing as well, is, okay, well, let's get people hooked on the product, using it. And then, if you want to train more perceptions, if you want to train more models, if you want to integrate it to something else, well, that becomes part of the services thing. And we're seeing that come up a lot. Now, the problem with that is scalability again. When the balances of services, when it leans towards services, you're customizing or configuring for a certain client, which means you need more people. So I think that there needs to be a balance there between the API which is the product, or the SDK, which is the product, and also the services. But I don't think a startup can survive without having the services as well.
So that if you look into most of the successful B2B type of business, they tend to have always a component of service in the very beginning. However, I think if we look forward, where do you think this industry, and particularly Chooch, will develop? Do you think it's going to be a pure play product and pure play API, or do you think it's going to always be a mix of API and service? Or third thing that could happen is you altogether specialized in a single application. Now that could be also another avenue. Where do you think things going?
Great question. We think the API is a good case to test the market. So if you have a stable product and a scalable product initially, you can test different verticals without taking up too much of people's times and so forth. I think you need that API to be able to test different use cases, and then allow the market to decide which use case is going to be the winner. And I think ours will probably be similar to that. I mean, now we have e-commerce clients, media clients, satellite imagery clients. We have clients in the surveillance security space. But which one makes the most sense, we'll see as things develop. But there will be one or two overwhelming verticals where this is going to be used in a more powerful way. And once you realize that, you need to go for that as a company. And maybe specialize in those verticals.
What do you think about? So we started talking about potential. That the original vision was about media interactivity and augmented reality. What do you think about, or what is your sense about the augmented reality application? Is this something that you feel is going to happen over the time, or you think this might be one of the big ones?
Well, let's go to the future and work backwards. Okay, so the future says, right? The future says that we're going to have glasses on our heads, like the glasses you're wearing, not the big clunky ones today. The clunky ones are prototypes of something that's going to come in the future, where the lens itself is going to tell us, is going to make us smarter. So we know that's going to happen in the future. We just know it. I mean, it's where this is going. It might take 10 years, it might take 20 years, it might take 5 years. We don't know. I mean, you can have discussion about this because, okay, there were first the radio or first the book, immersive tech. A book is an immersive tech, right? When you read a book, you're going into a different world. So that's like the first immersive tech. Then you go, and then you have a radio, and then you have television, then you have a computer, and then you have mobile, and now you're going to have glasses. Now, the problem with that is you can't really tell when the timing of that is going to be. So for us to say, okay, we're going to do AR, it's a bit risky. But the API that we have today is implementable onto AR very, very easily. So whenever the consumer takes that up, or whenever the market takes that up, our API will be already ready for that to implement it that way. Now, when it comes to timing, we don't know. I mean, but the ultimate goal here is to have Chooch as the operating system for seeing things in your environment in real time, in a more generalistic way.
So let's take a slightly deeper look on the business side, because I think all of us here in Silicon Valley, we attend all these meetings, meetups, and so on and so forth. But very often we focus on theory. And sometimes we're very fortunate to be in Silicon Valley because the theory is also important. But let's look at the practice for a second. So when a company like yours, and let's repeat, has this computer vision API to recognize things inside the images and videos. Now, at high level, there are lots of companies that do this. So at the very high level, there is Clarify, IBM, Microsoft, and Google, possibly other ones that are missing. So when you as a small company have to walk through the door of a customer, what it is that you really do? How do you position yourself? What are the tactics that you use to have your customers right away understand that this is different from, the other five that I mentioned? How do you
Right.
make that, that differentiation before they say, you know what, the next startup that wants to sell me something and it's unreliable, and it's going to be scrappy and waste a lot of time with them. I don't know if I have to jeopardize my career, if I'm in a corporate environment, I don't want to look bad and all of that. So how do you at least differentiate yourself right away? And what are the techniques and the tactics that you use?
Yeah, so I think in terms of approach, we're lucky that we're part of an ecosystem which allows startups to sort of thrive in many different ways. I mean, at least in the U.S., people allow startups to pitch to larger companies, whereas as you know in Europe, you can't even walk in the door. So I just say that in first because that's important. The second is, listen, we're a training company first. We're not a recognition company. And that's the first thing we say is like, we train an intelligent eye for your specific needs and so your specific use cases. And you'll never get that with any of the other big companies that it's a huge differentiation because when I train a bike company, my client bike company to recognize its bikes, I recognize the make, model, the pieces, I do the pricing and so forth. But when they put that bike into Google Vision or to Amazon recognition, it just says bicycle. So it's like night and day in terms of recognition. But what we do is we don't say we're a recognition company. That's the output. But what we do, we're an AI training company. So what we do is we train an AI for you and implement it into your system. That's the basic elevator pitch that we do.
But at the same time, you are positioning yourself as a service company. And at the same time, you are increasing the cost of producing the service.
Yes, yeah.
I'm sorry to be a bad MBA, but I'm coming from this angle as well. Go a little bit down, but I mean, it can be normal for the stage where you're in.
Well, it's we're trying to. So the API today the API is prediction driven. So it's automated in that sense. The training is fairly autonomous, but you need some people to get involved in that. So you're right, it becomes a service because there are people involved. But we're trying to automate that as well and make it self-service. But one thing that we've seen here is actually, great tech companies, great products, but bad service. That's, I think, in general in this part of the world. And for us, it's also important to give good service and provide that, really good quality, very fast feedback, very fast troubleshooting to clients. And I think that differentiates us as well because, our culture, we come from a services-driven culture, which means, okay, get up at 1 a.m. and fix that problem instead of waiting until the next day and having a whiteboard meeting and then checking out. You just have to be quick and agile. I think that's part of being a startup, but it's also part of being, part of the differentiator for startups who want to compete with the bigger companies.
That's a very good answer. Thanks about that. And, while we were talking about this, something very important came to my mind as well. And it is one of the other big challenges from, I would say, being a CEO of a small startup in a very high-tech, very advanced area is balancing the need for R&D and the need to produce revenue. What type of challenges have you seen in this area? Like, what was a decision was difficult to make? Maybe one where you had to sacrifice the development of the product, or where you had to sacrifice onboarding a customer. What type of challenges you have specifically, seen, and when was a case that you were particularly torn?
Great question. So, when you're in a environment like AI or deep learning, let's put it more specific, machine learning, deep learning, the components for these frameworks and models are unstable. They're not stable today. And that creates a lot of challenges for the product to be delivered. And so you need, as you said, R&D work and to make things stable and so forth. So the key here is, okay, well, do I use someone else's API, or do I use some open source code to develop? And we've always, chosen to, and we were lucky because we have a good team that does this. We always chose open source frameworks and open source code to make the components better. But for example, we had one company that had a specific use case, and we had to say no to them because we were unable to deliver the type of recognition that they needed at the time. And it teaches you, a lesson. It's like, well, you think you can do all these things, but at the same time, when you say, okay, I can deploy this in 1 week, usually it takes months to do the same. So that's really been a challenge with this type of tech. But we've listened to the market, but we're also always trying to make the tech better, because at the same time, if you don't have, and I think that's a problem with companies in Silicon Valley. It's more like, well, go and find the problem and then build the tech behind the problem. Whereas if you find the problem, you find the client, and then you promise too much and then you can't execute, that's also a big problem. So we did the reverse. We said, well, if we build the tech and do some serious R&D and hack our way through this, we'll find clients for it. We'll find more clients for it. So there's definitely a good balance there, but you have to be very intuitive at the same time. You can't spend years on end doing R&D, or even months on end. Sometimes you need to find a solution today. And so how do you find a solution today? You need to have a team that can hack through that.
So that's definitely interesting, and it leads me to a comment. And lots of business schools and training and marketing training for entrepreneurs, they all center around this concept of find the customers first, find the need first, which I think is definitely important, especially in, I would say, need-driven type of business, and businesses that are based on something that is happening today. But when you want to take things to the next level and invent the next new thing, technologically transformative, not always that approach is correct. In fact, I remember that there is a quote by Henry Ford, the inventor of the car, that said, if I'd asked it to people, they would have asked me for faster horses. I think that's kind of an interesting thing to, ponder about. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the point. It's you have two problems with that. The first problem is people only see the problems right in front of them, like one step ahead, and they may not be the real issues behind what drives that. So faster horses, is it possible? Probably not, unless you train them right. And the second problem is when you have that type of demand, and then you promise the demand, you promise, well, I can deliver this. And a lot of people do that. They trivialize the execution. And I see a lot of that as well here in Silicon Valley and all over the world is, they trivialize, they say, well, I can get it done. Well, maybe or maybe not, but it also trivializes all the tech that goes into building a stable product. So I think you have two issues there. So you need to balance it, I think. And of course, you need to service clients immediately, and you need something for that. You need something to be able to do that, but also you need to think of the future vision of what you're doing and how this will be implemented in 10 or 20 years time.
So let's take a look a little bit to your competitors. Is there out there one competitor that you admire, that you're scared of, or that you think has a wholesome technology or has a wholesome execution? Which one is it?
Well, I mean, we have a few competitors that have a live API like ours, like Clarify, Google Vision, Amazon Recognition. I think if you want to, well, the issue is, you're asking me the wrong question, because it's of course we see what they're doing and we recognize the strength of those companies. The only issue is, let's break them down into two. One where their core business is this. So there would be like Clarify. And I think Clarify is someone we can, is comparable to what we're doing because this is the only thing they do. But when you go to like the Googles or the Amazons, or it's a sideshow. It's really up in the air. I mean, but if you had to rank them, Google would be number one and Clarify would be number two in this field. And that's the honest answer to that. Where we fall in, I don't know. I mean, we think we're the best, but it's not up to us.
Well, that would be up to your customers. So let's take a broader look about the field of machine learning, artificial intelligence. So people use the two. I mean, machine learning in the end is a subdomain of artificial intelligence. But let's just look at the increasing level of automation, the increasing level of machines being able to cope with uncertainty. What is a company or a sector or industry sector that you don't work in, but it's very interesting for you? Like, what is a remarkable company that you have seen, a remarkable industry area where you you don't work on, but you're particularly interested in?
You mean in machine learning? And yeah. Well, I think all the voice stuff is very, very interesting. Everything that has to do with the Alexas of this world and anything with voice recognition. I think that has come a long way, which is interesting because you don't have the same development in visual for some reason, but voice has come further. So I think
what do you mean you do not have the same development? Do you think that the level of precision and accuracy of the vision algorithms is not yet matched the voice?
Yeah, it's not the same. Voice is well ahead in terms of accuracy and market expectations, but it's an easier problem to solve. That's why it's actually. I think I read somewhere, you can do the voice in like 18 to 20,000 classes, but in vision it's more like 800,000, 900,000 classes, and still it's not enough. So I think the vision is more complex and has different things. But yeah, I mean, anything that is voice driven, it has come a long way, and it's very interesting. And I think that's, that there have been major breakthroughs in that, which we like.
So what applications specifically you're looking forward in the voice? What applications that are already there?
Yeah, like real-time translation, real-time audio transcription. These are real things that are working today. Okay, they're not perfect. They're not perfect, of course, because everyone speaks with a different accent, and so it's not going to be perfect for a long time.
Okay, but with that we go back again to Google, because at least as far as I'm concerned, I use Google for real-time translation. I think a lot of people have been, I was in Ukraine a few months ago. I've been in Denmark, and I mean, it's kind of fantastic to be able to use. I was even on a date with the Google Translate.
Right.
That was really fun. Besides, like anything else beside Google in that area that has captured your attention?
Yeah, now looking for in healthcare, in genomes and in disease related, they're using machine learning there to scan like thousands of research papers and putting that into play to find solutions to certain diseases. So just met one company the other day who's doing that for Parkinson's, for example, Parkinson's disease. So they're taking research papers, having AI scan them, and then putting that information into neural networks and providing possible treatments for Parkinson's disease. I think there's an important element there for healthcare. Of course, healthcare is a different, it's a very highly regulated area. It may take years for us to see real applications in it, but I think there's some serious groundbreaking stuff going on in healthcare.
Well, that's definitely very interesting. So we'll have to take a look here at frontiers in artificial intelligence in that area, maybe next. So Emrah, we're very pleased to have you here today. Our time is about to end. Is there like a wish that you have for the next year or 2 years for your baby, for Chooch? What would you like the next 2 years to look like?
We'd like to survive. But yeah, I mean, we keep keep focusing on product, keep focusing on our clients. Those two things, and just making the product better and better, and solving real problems for these clients. That's really what we're about. And we're doing a good job so far, and I hope we continue doing that.
So that's very good. We wish you all the best. It has been a pleasure having you here, and have a great day.